Sometimes the most extraordinary acts of loyalty happen between species that were never meant to trust each other. In our world, where neighbors barely wave hello, perhaps we need to remember what true gratitude looks like even when it comes from the heart of a wild predator. This story came to me through channels I cannot reveal, but I can tell you it happened in Tanzania's Serengeti, where the ancient bond between man and nature still holds meaning. Rope burns carved deep into Jabu River's wrists like hot brands. The rough acacia bark pressed against his spine while his radio buzzed and sputtered with static. Then Sarah's voice cut through distant, worried as Sunday morning prayers. "Jabu, your last check-in was 4 hours back." He worked his jaw where dried blood had crusted on his split lip. Tommy Wade's rifle butt had left its mark good and proper. The poacher's truck tracks led east toward the border, leaving him tied here as a message for any other ranger fool enough to interfere. Through the heat shimmer, something golden moved between the thorn trees. Jabu's vision blurred, then sharpened clear as creek water. A male lion, maybe 150 yards out, watching him with amber eyes that seemed to hold recognition. The great cat's left shoulder bore a pale scar, arrow straight, clean as a surgeon's cut, 18 months back. Sarah's scalpel, his own hands holding that thrashing young lion steady. The magnificent creature took one deliberate step closer. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. 18 months earlier. Serengeti Veterinary Station. Hold, his shoulders down tight. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's voice cut through the young lion's growls. If he moves while I'm suturing, I'll nick the main artery. Jabu pressed his palms against warm, golden fur. The cat's eyes rolled white, showing crescents of pure terror, but the sleeping medicine was wearing off fast. Blood seeped through his coat where the poacher's wire snare had carved deep as a plow furrow. Easy now, big fella, easy. Sarah's scalpel caught the surgical lamp's glare as she worked with steady hands, cutting away embedded wire from torn muscle. The lion's heartbeat hammered against Jabu's palms rapid as hummingbird wings. "You talk to them like they understand every word," she murmured, not looking up from her careful work. "Reckon maybe they do." The cat's breathing hitched with each painful inhale. Grace used to say I had better conversations with stray barn cats than most folks. Sarah's hands paused for just a heartbeat. Grace. My wife was my wife. He cleared his throat, tasting red dust. Car wreck last year. The young lion went perfectly still, as if sensing the change in Jabu's voice like animals sense coming storms. Sarah resumed her cutting, cleaning torn flesh with movements gentle as a mother's touch. "I'm mighty sorry to hear that." "Yes, ma'am, me too." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hiss of the sterilizer and distant hyena calls drifting through open windows. Sarah knotted the last suture with the precision of someone who'd done this dance 100 times. There. She stepped back, peeling off blood-stained gloves. He'll live to see another sunrise. The young male's amber eyes fixed on Jabu's face not wild anymore, just bone-tired, like looking into a mirror that reflected too much truth about loneliness and loss. 3 weeks later, they'd tracked his recovery through the radio collar signals. The lion had found himself a pride near the Mara River crossing, strong as spring wheat, healthy, free as the wind. "You did fine work," Jabu had told Sarah that day. "We did fine work together." He'd nearly kissed her then, nearly reached across the space between them like a man with sense. Present moment, now that same cat stood 30 yards away, muscles rippling under sun-bleached gold. The surgical scar showed white against his left shoulder like a covenant mark. Full grown now, maybe 400 pounds of pure predator. Studying the man who'd once held him steady while healing happened. Jabu tested the hemp ropes again. The fibers had worked into his wounds like thorns. each movement sending fire up both arms. The lion tilted his massive head, nostrils flaring wide. Something was mighty wrong. The great cat's ears swiveled backward, catching sounds Jabu's human ears couldn't detect. From the scrub brush came a different kind of laughter, high-pitched, manic. Spotted hyenas. And they were getting closer. 24 hours earlier, the elephant cow lay on her side, trunk twisted like a broken garden hose. Flies swarm in the hollow sockets where tusks had been, their buzzing thick as molasses in the morning heat. The stench of dried blood mixed with sweet rot made Jabu's stomach churn. "Third one this month." Marshal Clayton Stone crouched beside the carcass, his worn boots squelching in blood-soaked earth. "They're getting mighty bold." Jabu circled the kill site, eyes tracking every detail like his daddy had taught him to read deer sign. Boot prints in dried mud size 11, maybe 12, with a chunk missing from the left heel. Tire tracks heading northeast, deep treads that bit into soft ground near the waterhole like teeth marks. "Same crew, you reckon?" "Has to be. Tommy Wade's handiwork quick. Clean cuts, no waste." Stone stood, brushing red dust from his knees with hands that showed 40 years of hard work. "Professional job, darn his hide." Dr. Sarah Mitchell's white veterinary truck pulled up in a dust cloud that caught the morning light like flour thrown in the air. She climbed out, camera already in hand, and began documenting the scene with the methodical care of a church secretary, recording Sunday attendance. "How long since they finished their butcher work?" she asked, not looking up from her viewfinder. 12 hours. Stone replied. "Maybe less. Bodies still warm in the middle." Jabu followed the tire tracks to where they joined the service road. The treads were fresh as yesterday's biscuits, sharply defined in every detail. These poachers knew every waterhole, every game trail, every blind spot in the ranger patrol routes better than Sunday school children knew their Bible verses. His radio crackled, "Base to all units. We got reports of automatic gunfire near Sector 7. Stone keyed his handset with weathered fingers. "This is Marshal Stone. Heading that way directly." Jabu studied the tire tracks again, following their path deeper into Parkland instead of toward the border. "I aim to follow these tonight, track them to their roost." "Negative." Stone's voice carried the authority of 4 decades keeping the peace. "We go in as a team, or we don't go at all. While we're sitting here planning, they're killing." Jabu kicked at the dried blood, each grain of sand stained dark as coffee grounds. Sarah looked up from her camera work, sweat beading on her forehead. "Jabu's got a point. Every hour we wait, every hour we rush in half-cocked, we lose good rangers." Stone's weathered face showed scars from his own young mistakes. "I've seen what happens when decent men try to play hero." Heat rose in Jabu's chest, spreading up his neck like fever. Grace's twisted car wrapped around that bridge support flashed through his mind clear as yesterday. He'd been working late that night too, chasing a different killer through these same endless trails. "I'll do reconnaissance only. Scout them out and radio back with their exact location." "That's what they all say, son." Sarah touched Jabu's arm, her fingers warm against his sweat-dampened shirt. "Clay's right. We ought to—" "No, ma'am." He pulled away from her gentle touch. "This stops tonight." 4 hours later, pre-dawn darkness. Jabu belly-crawled through thorn scrub that tore his shirt and drew blood with every movement. Below him, lantern light flickered between 3 parked trucks like fireflies in a mason jar. Voices carried on the still air 5 men, maybe 6, speaking a mix of Swahili and English that sounded like trouble brewing. "Base, this is Rivers," he whispered into his radio. "I got eyes on suspects." Static answered him like bacon frying in a skillet. He tried again, adjusting the frequency dial. Nothing but electronic snow. The poachers had a signal blocker, smart as college professors and twice as dangerous. Tommy Wade was ex-military. He'd know all about cutting communications. isolating his prey. Jabu had two choices clear as Sunday morning retreat and lose their trail forever, or disable their vehicles and trap them for the backup team. His shoulders ached where Grace's memory whispered about good intentions and bad endings. The first truck's hood opened silent as a prayer. He cut the electrical wires with his utility knife, each strand parting with a soft snap. The second vehicle sat farther from camp, hidden behind a boulder big as a barn, cold metal pressed against the base of his skull. Well. Jabu's blood turned to ice water. "Turn around real slow. Ranger boy." Tommy Wade's rifle muzzle felt like winter death against his neck. "Hands where I can see them. Nice and slow." Jabu raised his palms, engine grease still slick on his fingers like communion oil. Wade's rifle never wavered, the barrel steady as a church steeple against his skull. "You cost me 2 shipments last month, Tommy." "Ranger boy." "Just doing my job, sir." "Your job." Wade's laugh sounded like gravel rattling in an old coffee can. "Your job is counting elephants and taking pretty pictures for fat tourists with more money than sense." Two other men emerged from behind the trucks like ghosts materializing from thin air. One carried coiled rope, the hemp fibers thick as a man's wrist. Their boots crunched on scattered pebbles as they approached with the casual confidence of men accustomed to violence. "Tie him to that big acacia, the old grandfather tree." Rough hands grabbed Jabu's shoulders, dragging him 50 yards to an ancient tree whose trunk could shelter a whole congregation. The rope cut into his wrists as they wound it around his arms, each loop tighter than a miser's purse strings. Hemp fibers worked into his skin like tiny needles seeking blood. "Here's what's fixing to happen," Wade said, stepping close enough that Jabu could smell stale tobacco and whiskey on his breath. "Your ranger friends will come looking. Radio chatter's already buzzing like bees in a hive. They know you missed your check-in. When they do show up, we'll be long gone. But you'll still be here, advertising what happens to do-gooders who stick their noses where they don't belong. They'll track you down sure as Sunday follows Saturday. With what your radio..." Wade held up Jabu's crushed handset, plastic fragments falling like broken promises. "Oops, butterfingers." He tossed the pieces at Jabu's feet, electronic innards spilling onto red dirt like the guts of some mechanical creature. Wade leaned closer, his weathered face inches away, breath hot as a furnace. "Tell me about Dr. Sarah Mitchell." Ice water flooded Jabu's veins despite the morning heat. "What about her?" "Pretty little lady. Drives that white veterinary truck with the dent in the left rear panel from where she backed into the compound fence last month. Lives in Unit 7, the one with them blue kitchen curtains her mama probably sent from back home." Jabu's throat closed tight as a fist. "You leave her be. That depends entirely on you, Ranger boy." Wade's smile revealed tobacco-stained teeth, brown at the edges like autumn leaves. "See, we got ourselves a need for them elephant tracking collars, the ones only veterinarians can access. Makes hunting considerably easier when you know exactly where the herds are feeding and watering. She'll never help the likes of you." "Oh, she will when we explain what happened to her boyfriend, how he died screaming like a stuck pig because he played hero." Wade straightened, joints popping like kindling in a fire. "Or maybe she'll just disappear too. Accidents happen out here regular as clockwork. Leopards, flash floods, lions gone rogue. So many ways for a person to meet their maker in the bush." White-hot fury flooded Jabu's vision like looking directly into the sun. He fought against the ropes until blood ran down his forearms, staining the acacia bark like war paint. The hemp cut deeper with each desperate struggle. "There's that fire I heard about. Your Grace had that same spirit, right up until she hit that bridge support doing 60 miles an hour. Every muscle in Jabu's body went rigid as iron. "How in tarnation do you know about Grace? Small world, the Serengeti. Folks talk, especially when they've had a few drinks at Murphy's Bar down in Arusha town." Wade gestured to his men, who were already moving toward the trucks like a well-oiled machine. Your wife had real fire in her belly. Too bad about that wet road and all. The engines turned over smooth as butter. They'd only managed to disable one vehicle. Jabu watched the convoy disappear into pre-dawn darkness, red taillights fading like dying embers in a cold fireplace. Silence settled over the clearing, broken only by the distant whooping of hyenas and his own ragged breathing that sounded loud as thunder in his ears. His spare radio, clipped inside his vest pocket, crackled to life. "Jabu, this is Sarah. Where are you? You missed your 4 o'clock check-in." He twisted against the ropes, trying to reach the handset. His fingertips brushed the antenna but couldn't grip the plastic casing no matter how he strained. "Jabu, please respond. Clay's organizing a search party, but we need to know your location." Her voice carried worry now. Each word stretched thin with the kind of fear he'd heard in his own voice calling Grace's name in that sterile hospital corridor. The radio crackled again. Different voice this time, urgent as a fire bell. "Base to all units. We got reports of fresh elephant kill near Savannah. Multiple adults down, tusks harvested." While he hung here, helpless as a scarecrow, Wade's crew was already back to their bloody business. Jabu stopped fighting the ropes and let his head fall back against rough bark that felt like sandpaper against his skull. A new sound cut through the dawn chorus, something between a cough and a grunt, low and rumbling like distant thunder. Something big was moving through the thorn scrub, something that made his skin prickle with ancient recognition. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into a blast furnace that could melt the devil's own pitchfork. Sweat stung Jabu's eyes, running in steady streams down his temples like tears he couldn't shed. His throat felt like sandpaper wrapped around broken glass, each swallow more painful than a dentist's drill. Sarah's voice crackled through the radio again. "Jabu, please respond. Clay's expanding the search grid, clear to Sector 12. He twisted his wrists against the hemp rope that had worked into his flesh like barbed wire. The fibers had carved raw channels that burned like brands fresh from the blacksmith's fire. His fingertips brushed the radio's antenna, so close he could feel the metal's warmth, but his shoulders wouldn't rotate far enough no matter how he strained. "We found your truck abandoned near the river crossing. Tire tracks heading in 3 different directions like a puzzle with missing pieces. Wrong sectors." They were searching east while he hung 15 miles north. Might as well be on the moon. The radio fell silent except for static bursts and routine patrol check-ins. Jabu counted each transmission, marking time by the familiar voices of rangers he'd worked alongside for years. None mentioned finding his trail. By midday, his shadow had shrunk to a small pool beneath his boots like spilled ink. The acacia's sparse leaves offered about as much relief as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. Salt crystals formed at the corners of his mouth where sweat had dried white as frost. His lips cracked when he tried to wet them with a tongue that felt thick as shoe leather. A spotted hyena emerged from the scrub, its shoulders rolling with that distinctive gait that looked like a drunk man trying to walk a straight line. The animal stopped 20 yards away, nose raised high, testing the air with careful sniffs like a housewife checking if the milk had soured. Dark eyes studied Jabu with intelligence that made his skin crawl worse than spiders. The hyena's ears swiveled forward, then back like radar dishes. It retreated into the thorn bushes but didn't go far. Jabu could hear it panting in whatever shade it found, waiting with the patience of an undertaker measuring a coffin. 2 more hyenas appeared before the sun reached its peak. Sliding from the brush like shadows given flesh, they settled in a rough half-circle, close enough to watch but far enough to avoid human scent that made their noses wrinkle. Their spotted coats blended with dappled shadows, making them appear and disappear like ghosts at a seance. The radio crackled again. "Jabu, it's Sarah." Her voice carried a tremor now, words slightly slurred with exhaustion that sounded like she'd been crying. "I know you can hear me somewhere out there. Clay says your tracking device went dark at 3:47 this morning. We're expanding the search to include all of Sector 9. Still the wrong direction. Might as well be looking for a needle in a haystack the size of Texas. I should have stopped you. Should have made you wait for backup like any sensible person would. Static swallowed her next words, then cleared like morning fog. If something terrible happened because I let you go alone. The transmission ended sudden as a door slamming. Sweat pooled in the hollow of Jabu's throat, trickling down his chest inside his shirt like slow-moving creek water. The rope had chafed through fabric at his shoulders, abrading skin with each slight movement. Every breath felt thick as molasses, like inhaling liquid fire that burned his lungs. One hyena rose and approached to 15 yards, studying him with calculating eyes like a banker figuring interest. It sat on its haunches, pink tongue lolling between yellowed teeth, and began that characteristic giggling call that sounded like a madman's laughter. The sound echoed off rocky outcrops, carrying far across the savannah like a dinner bell for death. 2 answering calls came from different directions. More company was coming to the feast. Base to all units. Marshal Stone's voice filled the radio with authority. We got confirmation of fresh elephant kill near Savannah drainage. 2 adults, 3 calves scattered to the 4 winds. Wade's crew is still active in the area. While he hung here helpless as a Sunday hat on a scarecrow, more elephants were dying, more families torn apart by men with chainsaws and hearts black as coal tar. The afternoon heat pressed down like the weight of all his failures. Jabu's head lolled forward, chin touching his chest. Dark spots danced at the edges of his vision like flies buzzing around roadkill. Grace's voice whispered in his ear, clear as morning church bells. You always did think you could save everyone. Jabu Rivers? Not a vision sent by the Almighty. Just memory playing tricks with a brain baked dry as yesterday's cornbread. Remember what you told me the night before the accident, about that poacher you'd been chasing for 3 solid weeks. He did remember. Marcus Kruger, a man from Namibia with military training who'd been hunting the park's grandmother elephants like they were nothing more than walking ivory. Jabu had spent 17 straight nights following cold trails, sleeping in his truck, eating cold beans from a can. I said I was tired of waiting for my husband to come home to his supper, and I said I'd catch him real soon, just needed a few more days. But you never did catch him, because while you were chasing shadows in the bush, I drove to town by myself, because I was lonelier than a widow at Christmas, because my husband cared more about dead elephants than his living wife. The memory cut deeper than any knife. Grace in their kitchen, car keys in her small hand, asking him to come along, just for groceries, just to spend 1 hour together like normal married folks. This isn't the same thing, he whispered through cracked lips that barely moved. Isn't it Sarah's voice on that radio sounds exactly like mine used to? Worried sick, scared half to death, waiting for a man who's never coming home. A new sound cut through his fevered thoughts, a low rumble, barely audible over the hyena's panting. All 3 scavengers lifted their heads at once, ears pricked forward like hunting dogs catching scent. Through the shimmering air between the thorn trees, a golden shape moved with liquid grace that belonged to something born to rule. The hyenas scrambled to their feet, hackles bristling like porcupine quills. But Jabu's eyes focused on something that made his heart skip a beat, a pale scar running straight across the approaching lion's left shoulder. Sweet, merciful Providence. How in the world was that cat here? The male lion stopped 50 yards away like he was respecting some invisible church pew. His mane had thickened since Jabu last saw him dark gold with black edges that caught the afternoon light like burnished copper. The surgical scar showed white against his left shoulder, straight as a ruler line that cut through muscle and fur. The 3 hyenas rose to their feet, lips pulling back to show yellowed fangs like broken piano keys. Their spotted coats bristled as they formed a ragged line between the tree and the approaching king of beasts. Jabu forced his eyes to focus through the heat shimmer that made everything dance like a mirage. Lions and hyenas fought over territory, regular as Sunday service. battling for kills and dominance like feuding neighbors over a property line. But this wasn't about food. The hyenas had been waiting for him to weaken and collapse like a house of cards. The lion was throwing a wrench into their patient calculations. "Easy now, big fella," Jabu whispered, though his throat could barely form words thicker than molasses. The lion's amber eyes fixed on him for 3 long heartbeats, then shifted to track the hyena's movements like a hawk watching field mice. His tail twitched once, that black tuft cutting through the air sharp as a whip crack. The alpha hyena, a battle-scarred female with torn ears that looked like chewed paper, made the first move. She charged not at the lion, but straight toward Jabu Easy Pickings, unable to run or fight back like a trussed chicken. Her shoulders rolled with deadly efficiency, covering ground in powerful bounds that kicked up red dust. The lion intercepted her mid-leap like a linebacker tackling a quarterback. 400 pounds of muscle and bone collided with the hyena, bowling her sideways into the dirt hard enough to rattle her teeth. No claws extended, no killing bite, just overwhelming force that sent her tumbling through thorn scrub like a rag doll. The other 2 hyenas circled wider, testing different angles of attack like generals studying a battlefield map. The lion positioned himself square between them and the acacia tree. His massive head swiveled to track their movements, ears flat against his skull like he meant serious business. This wasn't normal behavior for any creature Jabu had studied. Lions killed hyenas when threatened, drove them from fresh kills through superior strength and numbers, but they didn't guard humans. They sure didn't put themselves at disadvantage to protect creatures outside their own blood kin. Unless this particular cat remembered surgical lights and gentle hands holding him steady while pain melted away like ice in July heat. The alpha female regained her feet, shaking dust from her coat like a wet dog. She approached again, but careful now, reading the lion's body language like a poker player studying cards. Her companions flanked left and right, patient as preachers waiting for collection time. The lion's chest rumbled a sound Jabu felt through the ground, vibrating up through his boot soles into his very bones. Not a roar, but a warning that carried the weight of absolute certainty and consequences. The hyenas tested his resolve with darting rushes, feints that brought them within striking distance before they wheeled away like barn swallows dodging a hawk. Each time, the lion shifted to block their path to Jabu. His movements were economical as a miser counting pennies, controlled saving energy in the killing heat. One hyena rushed from the blind side while her packmates created distraction from the front like a well-rehearsed magic trick. The lion spun faster than seemed possible for something his size, meeting her charge with a swipe of his massive forepaw. She tumbled backward, yelping like a kicked cur. Still no claws extended. No killing intent in those amber eyes. The hyenas regrouped at 20 yards, panting in whatever shade they could find like dogs on a summer porch. Their dark eyes never left Jabu, but they'd learned the price of getting too close. For now, they were content to wait like buzzards circling roadkill. The lion settled onto his haunches 15 yards from the tree, close enough to discourage scavengers, far enough to avoid concentrated human scent that might trigger flight instincts bred into his very soul. His breathing was labored from the brief scuffle. Pink tongue lolled between white fangs sharp as railroad spikes, and his sides heaved with each breath. But his position never wavered. Amber eyes constantly scanning for threats like a sentry on duty. Hours crawled past slower than cold molasses. The sun angled lower, stretching shadows across red earth like fingers reaching for something just out of grasp. Jabu's radio crackled with increasingly desperate search reports, all from sectors miles away from where he actually hung. His spare battery indicator showed 2 bars remaining, blinking like a dying firefly. The lion rose and paced to a shallow depression where yesterday's brief rain had pooled. He drank deeply, pink tongue lapping dark water like he was savoring fine wine. then returned to his self-appointed guard post without so much as a backward glance. Jabu's throat convulsed, watching the great cat drink. His own tongue felt swollen thick as shoe leather against the roof of his mouth. Salt crystals had formed in the corners of his eyes where tears had evaporated before they could fall. As twilight approached with the promise of cooler air, the hyenas grew restless as caged wildcats. They'd learned the lion wouldn't kill them outright, but hunger was overriding caution like water wearing down stone. They began testing again closer approaches, more coordinated movements that spoke of pack intelligence. The alpha female made her decision as the first evening stars appeared like pinholes in black velvet. While her companions created distraction with mock charges, she rushed from Jabu's blind side, low and fast as a striking snake. The lion intercepted her, but momentum carried the hyena past his guard like a football player breaking through the line. Her jaws snapped inches from Jabu's leg, close enough that he felt the heat of her breath and smelled the rotten meat on her teeth. Jabu threw his weight sideways as far as the ropes allowed, muscles screaming in protest. Hyena teeth clicked on empty air where his calf had been just a heartbeat before. The lion's roar exploded through the clearing, not a hunting cry, but a territorial challenge that shook leaves from the acacia branches like an earthquake. The sound carried for miles across the savannah, a beacon that announced his presence to every creature with ears to hear. The hyenas scattered like leaves in a windstorm. In the sudden silence that followed, Jabu heard diesel engines in the distance, multiple vehicles working hard, approaching fast as a summer storm. The lion heard them too. He rose, muscles bunching under golden coat like coiled springs, and looked directly at Jabu. Those amber eyes held something that went beyond animal instinct recognition. Acknowledgement, an old debt finally coming due. The great cat turned toward the approaching sounds and melted into darkening scrub like smoke dissolving in wind. Just as searchlights swept across the clearing bright as Judgment Day. But those engines weren't coming from the direction of the ranger station where help should be. They were coming from the east, from the border crossing where trouble lived and breathed. And they were slowing down like they'd found exactly what they were looking for. Jabu. Sarah's voice cut through the darkness like a church bell calling sinners home. Her flashlight beam swept across the clearing as her white veterinary truck skidded to a halt, dust billowing in the headlight glare like flour from a busted sack. "Here," he croaked, the word scraping his raw throat like broken glass dragged over sandpaper. She reached him first, utility knife already in her hand like she'd done this dance before. The ropes fell away as Marshall Stone's truck pulled up behind her, engine ticking in the sudden quiet like a pocket watch counting down to judgment. "Good Lord!" "Jabu!" Stone climbed out, surveying the scene with eyes that had seen too much over 4 decades. "How long you been hanging here?" 16 hours, maybe more." His legs buckled like a newborn colt as Sarah helped him stand. Blood rushed back into his arms with needle-sharp intensity, each heartbeat driving fire through dead nerves that screamed like banshees. "Where's Wade?" Stone's hand rested on his sidearm. "Ready for trouble. Gone to ground. Hit the elephant herds near Saranera while y'all searched for me in the wrong county." Jabu's voice cracked like old leather on the last word. Stone's radio crackled with the voice of doom, bass to Marshall Stone, confirming 7 adult elephants killed at coordinates 77 Alpha, tusks harvested clean, carcasses left for the scavengers. 7 elephants, 7 families torn apart while he hung here helpless as a scarecrow in a windstorm. Sarah pressed a water bottle to his cracked lips like communion wine. Small sips now. The water burned his throat worse than cheap whiskey, but he forced it down. "How many more died on account of me playing the fool hero?" "Don't you start that," she said, but her voice carried worry thick as gravy. 9 elephants, 10. He pushed the bottle away, water dribbling down his chin like drool from a village idiot. "Grace died because I was never home for supper." Now elephants die because I got myself caught like some greenhorn tourist. Jabu, stop this foolishness. Some ranger I turned out to be. Can't protect my own wife. Can't protect the animals I swore an oath to guard. Can't even sabotage a few truck engines without getting captured like a chicken thief in broad daylight. Stone appeared at his shoulder, smelling of coffee and tobacco. Wade knew our search patterns down to the minute. Someone's been feeding him information about patrol schedules, radio frequencies, the whole shebang. Who? Don't rightly know yet. But he mentioned Dr. Mitchell by name. Knew which compound unit she lives in, what time she takes her morning coffee, details that would make your skin crawl. Sarah went pale as fresh milk in the flashlight glare. What kind of details? Enough to make it crystal clear they've been watching you closer than a hawk watches a henhouse. Stone's expression hardened like concrete setting. They want access to them tracking collars. Plan to hunt herds electronically instead of wandering around blind. Cold spread through Jabu's stomach despite the lingering heat. They'll come after you next. Sarah? Sure as rain follows thunder. Let them try, I say. You don't understand what you're up against. Jabu struggled to his feet, swaying like a drunk on Saturday night. Wade isn't some bush poacher with more guts than brains. He's organized, military trained. He knew things about Grace private things only local folks would know. Stone keyed his radio with weathered fingers. Base, this is Marshal Stone. I need immediate security detail at the research compound. Priority 1. That's not near enough, Jabu said, tasting blood where he'd bitten his tongue. Sarah needs to transfer to Nairobi tonight. Stay there until we catch every last one of them varmints. I'm not running from anybody. Yes, you darn well are. His voice cracked with exhaustion and something deeper that came from the bottom of his soul. I won't lose another person I care about to this cursed job. The words hung in the air like smoke from a grass fire, heavy with truth that hurt worse than his rope burns. Sarah stared at him with eyes that could see clear through to his black heart. Is that what you think happened, that your work killed Grace? He couldn't meet her gaze. His boots were caked with red mud mixed with his own blood from the rope wounds. Even standing here breathing, he was contaminating everything around him with his own worthless failure. Look at me. Jabu Rivers. He shook his head like a stubborn mule. She grabbed his chin with fingers strong from years of veterinary work, forcing him to face her. You think Grace died because you worked late that night? Should have been with her. Should have driven her to town myself instead of letting her go alone. Grace died because a drunk driver with 3 prior convictions ran a red light at the Mto-Wambu intersection. I pulled the police report. Jabu. The hospital records too. Her blood was clean as spring water. The other driver tested higher than a church steeple and had been drinking since noon. The information hit him like sledgehammer blows to the chest. The first report said mechanical failure. The preliminary report before toxicology came back from the lab. Sarah's voice gentled like a mother talking to a hurt child. Grace wasn't driving home mad from another lonely night. She was coming back from her Tuesday book club meeting, same as she'd done every week for 2 years running. Jabu's knees buckled completely, strength leaving him like water from a busted barrel. Stone caught his elbow before he hit the ground face first. Easy there, son. But Jabu wasn't listening to anything except the sound of his own world crumbling like a house built on sand. For 18 long months, he'd carried guilt that belonged to a stranger with a bottle and no more conscience than a rattlesnake. He'd twisted his memories, rewritten the whole story to make himself the villain in his own wife's death. I need to find Wade, he whispered like a prayer. You need a hospital bed and 3 square meals. Sarah said with authority that brooked no argument. But the elephants will still be dead tomorrow morning, and the day after that. Her voice carried the weight of hard truth. But you'll be alive to protect the herds that aren't pushing up daisies yet. She was right as rain in August. He knew it in his bones. But knowing and believing were different as night and day. especially when you'd spent a year and a half learning to hate yourself like it was a full-time occupation. His radio crackled with a voice he didn't recognize. "This is Dr. Patel at Savannah Medical Station. We got a ranger down with multiple gunshot wounds. Need immediate helicopter evacuation to Arusha General Hospital." Stone grabbed the handset like it was a lifeline. Identity of the wounded ranger: Marcus Webb, age 22, found unconscious near the elephant kill site with a note pinned to his uniform shirt. What kind of note? Static filled the channel thick as fog. Then Dr. Patel's voice returned clear as a bell. It says, "Tell Rivers his pretty veterinarian girlfriend is next on our shopping list." The blood in Jabu's veins turned to ice water cold enough to freeze hell itself. Veterinary clinic. Next morning, Jabu's shoulders screamed like tortured souls as the nurse changed his dressings with hands gentle as his grandmother's. Rope burns had carved deep grooves in his wrists, raw channels that would leave permanent scars like reminders of his own foolishness. Each touch of antiseptic felt like liquid fire poured directly from the devil's own kitchen. "Any numbness in your fingers?" Dr. Patel asked, making notes on her clipboard with a pen that scratched like fingernails on slate. "Some." He flexed his hands, watching tendons move under a braided skin like wires under torn leather. "It'll fade like morning mist. The circulation damage isn't permanent. Praise the Lord." She clicked her pen with authority. "But you need rest. Real rest. Not whatever you call sleep in that ranger station cot." Through the window, Jabu watched Sarah loading medical supplies into her truck like she was preparing for battle. She'd volunteered for the morning patrol despite his protests that fell on ears deaf as fence posts checking elephant tracking collars that Wade's crew might be monitoring like wolves watching sheep. "When can I return to active duty?" "A week, maybe 2, depending on how those wounds heal up." Dr. Patel set down her clipboard like she was laying down the law. "But you need to understand something, son. Marcus Webb was shot in the shoulder and thigh. Painful as all get out, but not life-threatening. The blood loss made it look worse than Sunday sermon about hellfire. But the note Wade left was mind games, pure and simple. Wade wants you angry and reckless as a bull in a china shop." Her eyes held the wisdom of someone who'd patched up too many heroes. "Don't give him what he's fishing for." Sarah's compound unit, afternoon. The couch was too short for Jabu's long frame, but it beat his empty ranger quarters where Grace's photographs still lined the walls like ghosts refusing to leave. Sarah moved between kitchen and living room, bringing him soup that tasted like home-cooked Sunday dinner and memories of better times. "You don't need to play nursemaid," he said, watching her bustle about like a mother hen. "I'm a veterinarian. Remember, monitoring wounded critters is my bread and butter." "I'm not wounded. I'm contaminated." The words came out bitter as black coffee left too long on the stove. She stopped stirring her coffee, spoon frozen halfway to her mouth. "Explain that foolishness. Everything I touch turns to dust and ashes. Grace, the elephants yesterday. Marcus Webb shot full of holes." He stared at his bandaged wrists like they held the answers to life's cruel mysteries. Even that lion shouldn't have been there. Wild animals don't guard humans unless something's gone wrong with their natural instincts. Sarah settled beside him on the narrow couch, close enough that he could smell her soap and the lingering scent of antiseptic. "What if you're looking at this whole thing backward? How do you figure? What if Grace didn't die because you worked too much? What if you started working too much because Grace died?" The words hit him like cold creek water in August. "That's not. When did you start them night patrols? The solo tracking missions that had everyone worried sick?" He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it like a trap snapping shut. The timeline was clear as spring water once he stopped avoiding the truth like it carried plague. The obsessive hunting had started after the funeral, not before. "You turned work into punishment," Sarah continued with the patience of a schoolmarm teaching arithmetic. "Made yourself the villain in a story that already had a drunk driver with 3 DUI convictions who shouldn't have been behind the wheel of a tricycle. But if I'd been home that night, Grace still would have gone to book club, still would have driven the same route at the same time she'd been driving for 2 years, still would have had the green light when that fool ran the red doing 60 in a 30 zone. Jabu's throat closed up tighter than a miser's purse. You can't know that for certain. I can know this much: the ranger who held that lion steady during surgery wasn't broken goods. He was gentle as a lamb, patient as Job, the kind of man who sees pain and tries to heal it instead of causing more. She reached across the couch and touched his bandaged wrist like she was touching something precious. That same man is sitting here now, trying to figure out how to protect elephants and colleagues and everyone he cares about. Not because he's cursed, but because he's got a decent heart beating in his chest. Outside, his radio crackled with routine patrol reports. Rangers checking in from sectors across the park. Familiar voices he'd worked alongside for years. Normal folks doing necessary work without martyrdom or guilt weighing them down like millstones. Wade mentioned Grace specifically, Jabu said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Details about the accident that weren't in any newspaper. What kind of details? He said she had fire in her spirit, right up until she hit that bridge support. Jabu's voice caught like a fishhook. How would he know about her personality unless someone local had been flapping their gums? Sarah went very still, like a deer sensing danger. What bridge? The Mato Wambu crossing where he stopped mid-sentence, the words dying in his throat. Hold on. The police report said intersection. You said red light and drunk driver. Because that's exactly what happened. God rest her soul. That drunk fool ran a red light at the town center intersection. Grace never made it anywhere near any bridge. Ice water ran through Jabu's veins colder than January Creek water. Then how in tarnation did Wade know about a bridge? Sarah was already reaching for her phone, fingers flying over the screen like she was typing out prayers. Because he wasn't talking about Grace's accident. He was talking about someone else entirely. Her fingers worked the screen, pulling up news stories from years past. Look here, 3 years back. Bridge accident near the border crossing. Sarah Kimani, 28 years old, veterinarian from Nairobi. Car went over the guardrail during a thunderstorm. The photograph on the screen showed a young woman with kind eyes and a determined chin, someone who could have been Sarah's own sister, born from the same mold. Wade's been hunting veterinarians for years, Sarah whispered like she was speaking in church. Tracking collars, medical supplies, access to the elephants. We're not just witnesses to his crimes, we're walking resources he needs to harvest. Jabu's radio crackled with the voice of authority. All units, this is base. We got reports of automatic weapons fire near the research compound. All responding units use extreme caution. Through the window, black smoke rose from the direction of the main research facility like a signal fire announcing trouble. Sarah grabbed her medical kit with hands that shook like autumn leaves. I got to help with casualties. No, ma'am. Jabu struggled to his feet like an old man getting up from church pew. Wade's not attacking the compound. He's drawing everyone there like bees to honey while he comes for you. Gravel crunched outside as the vehicles approached, but from the wrong direction entirely. Not from the main road where help should come, but from the service track that connected to the maintenance sheds where shadows lived and breathed. The same track Wade's trucks had used to escape yesterday like smoke disappearing in wind. The engines were slowing down like they'd found exactly what they were hunting for. 1 week later, dawn patrol. Jabu's wrists still pulled tight as piano wire as he gripped the steering wheel. Rope scars tugging with each turn like reminders of lessons learned the hard way. Dr. Patel had cleared him for light duty, though Sarah insisted on riding patrol together until Wade's capture was confirmed beyond all doubt. Elephant herd at 10 o'clock, she said, pointing toward a cluster of gray shapes near the waterhole that looked like boulders come to life. Through binoculars that had seen better days, Jabu counted 14 adults and 8 calves moving with the unhurried grace of creatures who owned the world. The matriarch wore tracking collar MW23, her massive ears flapping lazy rhythms in the morning heat like church fans on a summer Sunday. All present and accounted for. Praise the Lord. Wade's been quiet as a church mouse since the compound incident, Sarah observed, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat against the climbing sun. Too quiet for my liking. They'd found his abandoned camp 2 days after the failed raid cold ashes. Scattered equipment. Tire tracks leading toward 3 different border crossings like a shell game played with human lives. Either he'd fled for good or was planning something that would make his previous work look like child's play. Marshall Stone's truck appeared in their mirrors, approaching fast with lights flashing like Christmas in July. He pulled alongside and rolled down his window, dust swirling between the vehicles. "Got them," Stone said without preamble, his weathered face showing satisfaction deep as a well. "Wade and 4 crew members. Tanzanian authorities caught them at the Namanga crossing with 200 pounds of ivory and enough evidence to hang them twice over." Relief flooded Jabu's chest warm as Sunday morning coffee. "Confirmed capture. In custody and singing like a church choir, Wade had outstanding warrants in 3 countries. He's looking at 25 to life if he sees the light of day again." Sarah leaned across the truck cab, her shoulder warm against his. "What about the informant?" Stone's weathered face showed the conflicted emotions of a man who'd seen too much. "Marcus Webb. Wade's people were holding his baby sister hostage in a Nairobi slum. Kid was feeding them patrol schedules to keep her breathing." "He's barely old enough to shave," Jabu said, remembering his own mistakes at that tender age. "Scared. Not corrupt. Exactly my thinking. He gets counseling and desk duty for 6 months. Everyone deserves a second chance in this life." After Stone drove away in a cloud of red dust, Sarah turned to study Jabu's profile like she was reading a book. "How do you feel about all this? Like it's not over. There'll be others where Wade came from, and we'll deal with them when they show their faces. Together." He pulled the truck into shade beneath a massive baobab tree that had probably been standing when Moses was in diapers. Through the windshield. The endless Serengeti stretched in golden waves broken by scattered acacia and distant rocky outcrops that looked like sleeping giants. "That night at the compound," Jabu said, watching a secretary bird stalk through the grass. "When Wade's men came calling for you, they didn't come for me personal. They came for the tracking database. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time." But Jabu remembered the sequence clear as spring water. Wade's trucks approaching from the service road while explosions distracted everyone at the main compound. The precision timing, the knowledge of her exact whereabouts down to the minute. "You saved yourself," he said with quiet admiration. "Locked the laboratory, destroyed the computer drives, called for backup. I was lying on your couch feeling sorry for myself while you handled business like a professional soldier." Sarah smiled, the expression lighting up her whole face. Grace would have done the exact same thing. Yes, ma'am. She surely would have. They finished their patrol in comfortable silence, checking tracking signals and recording observations that would help protect these magnificent creatures. Routine work that didn't require heroics or martyrdom, just patience. Attention to detail, and the understanding that protection was a daily commitment made fresh each morning like coffee and prayers. As they headed back toward base, movement caught Jabu's eye. A male lion stood on a distant ridge, magnificent mane catching the afternoon light like spun gold. The great cat watched their vehicle for a long moment, then turned and disappeared over the crest like morning mist. "You see that?" he asked Sarah. "What, when he looked again?" The ridge was empty except for wind-bent grass swaying like wheat in a breeze. Real or imagined. It didn't matter one whit. Some debts went deeper than blood, and some guardians never truly left their posts no matter how far they wandered. That evening, Sarah's compound. They sat on the small porch, sharing a bottle of decent wine while sunset painted the sky in layers of gold and crimson that would make any artist weep with joy. Jabu's radio, switched to emergency frequency only, murmured quietly on the side table like a sleeping child. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said, her voice soft as evening prayer. "Always. That first day we operated together, the lion surgery. You told me Grace said you talk to animals better than people." "Yes, ma'am." Was that the honest truth? Jabu considered the question while watching shadows lengthen across red earth like fingers reaching for home. Maybe it was back then. Animals want simple things: food, safety, companionship. People want those same things, but they also want meaning, purpose, forgiveness for mistakes they can't undo no matter how hard they pray. And now he looked at her, really looked. Evening light caught gold flecks in her brown eyes like flakes in a prospector's pan. A small scar on her chin from some childhood adventure she'd mentioned once, the way she held her wine glass carefully, as if protecting something precious and fragile. Now, I reckon I'm learning that people aren't so different from animals after all. They want to feel safe in their own skin. They want to belong somewhere that matters. They want to know their lives count for something more than just taking up space. Sarah leaned against his shoulder, her weight warm and solid as Sunday morning faith. "Do you feel like you belong somewhere now?" In the distance, a lion roared, not a challenge or warning, but a simple statement of presence, a reminder that the wild remained wild, dangerous and beautiful and worthy of protection by those blessed with the calling. But protection didn't require sacrifice on some altar of guilt. It required wisdom earned through hard experience, commitment renewed each dawn, and the courage to remain open to love despite the certainty of eventual loss. Jabu turned off his radio and pulled Sarah closer, breathing in the scent of her hair mixed with African dust and the promise of tomorrow. "Yes, ma'am. I believe I do." Tomorrow would bring new elephants to count, new poachers to track, new crises that demanded his attention like children calling for their father. Tonight there was wine and warmth and the woman who'd taught him that healing was possible without heroics, that love could bloom again in soil watered with tears, somewhere in the darkening bush. Amber eyes watched with patient satisfaction. The debt was paid in full. The ancient compact honored between species that understood loyalty ran deeper than blood or law. In the timeless arithmetic of the Savannah, kindness created bonds that transcended death, difference, and the passing of seasons. The great cat turned away from the lights of human civilization and padded silently into the vast African night, carrying with him the knowledge that some guardians protected through gentleness rather than violence, through mercy rather than vengeance. And in this broken world, that was miracle enough. When I first heard this story from a park ranger in Tanzania, I wasn't sure I believed it. A lion remembering a human who'd helped heal him, it seemed too perfect, like something from a children's storybook. But as I sat across from Jabu Rivers in that small cafe in Arusha, watching him unconsciously rub the rope scars on his wrists while he spoke, I realized the truth wasn't about whether animals can feel gratitude. The truth was about what happens when we stop seeing ourselves as separate from the world around us. Jabu never claimed the lion consciously chose to protect him. "Maybe it was just territorial behavior," he said. "Maybe I was seeing things from dehydration. Doesn't matter. What mattered was having time to remember who Grace really was, instead of the guilty story I'd been telling myself for 18 months. Sarah joined us later, her veterinary truck dusty from another long day protecting elephants. She and Jabu moved around each other with the easy rhythm of people who've learned to share both work and worry. "The real miracle," she told me, "wasn't a lion keeping hyenas away. It was Jabu finally forgiving himself for something that was never his fault to begin with. Some debts, I've learned, exist only in our own hearts, and sometimes healing requires nothing more than the courage to set them down." Disclaimer: this story is inspired by accounts from wildlife conservation workers and is created solely for entertainment purposes. The narrative does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental.